Morning, everybody. We're going to be working on some tenors today in this practice stream. If you're new here, you've never stopped by, in these practice streams, I like to share how I practice, what I practice, and answer some questions in the chat, or chats, I should say. All of the practice streams are found in this playlist that's got this video at the top that gives you a very quick overview of how to use all of the just under 300 practice streams in here. I include timestamps in the description so you can see what am I talking about or what am I working on, so you can take a peek at how I practice things. As somebody who's been playing drums since 1998 and been teaching since 2003 and have a doctorate in music education. Now, when I answer some questions, I take those questions and I edit them down into like refined, more coherent thought than when I'm live streaming, and I put them in this drumming tips playlist. There are like 9 hours of content, something like that. So if you see a title that interests you and you click on it, you'll actually find that there are timestamps for other topics in each one of these little drumming tips videos. So check them out if you're interested in learning more about what I might have to say about some of the questions in the chat. You can find everything organized on my YouTube in the home tab, but the best place is to go to /drum on my website. So if you go up here to the link, there's 55 chop exercises, just over 900 grid variations. There's a bunch of timing exercises to work on limb independence, which I was working on yesterday. We've got 55 drum charts. We've got over 200 marching bass related exercises, just under 200 technique exercises. I actually added in 4 more this morning that are great for working on your fulcrum control. They're scheduled to release. And then here are the lessons and tips and whatnot. Today, we're going to work on tenors. Now, I'm going to warm up, then I'm going to stretch and massage, and then I'm going to answer some questions that I've received on some of the YouTube videos that I have put out. So some excellent questions around like playing zones. What are they? How do I consider them when playing tenors? Also some questions around how do I come up with splits when moving around the drums, like with stick control or something like flam accents, etc. And then some questions around playing slow versus playing fast. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes off screen, etc. Just got off the pad right now. Nice. The instructor actually talked to me and told me not to quit. Well, okay. Did they apologize? Or did they at least like say, here are the steps I'm going to take to make things better? Because otherwise, like, is it an abusive relationship? I don't know much, but like, if somebody is like, oh, I promise I'll be better, and then they're not, walk away from them. But I hope things are better with that situation and whatnot. But anyways, before we do all this stuff, I need to get motivated here with Shia LaBeouf. So Shia, help me out. Whoop, let's hide him. Copyright. Do it. Just do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow. So just do it. Make your dreams come true. Just do it. Some people dream success. Well, you're going to wake up and work hard at it. Nothing is impossible. You should get to the point where anyone else would quit. And you're not going to stop there. No, what are you waiting for? Do it. Just do it. Yes, you can. Just do it. If you're tired of starting over, stop giving up. Oh, yeah. I'm super motivated now. Oh, look at that flex. Good job, Shia. Motivating the masses. Speaking of, let me share a quote that resonates with me. That might resonate with you. Maybe not. I don't know. I want to share it anyways. It's my channel. I do what I want. All right, so the quote is, what habits are you reinforcing right now? So if you are engaging in some kind of a practice where you're just like swiping, scrolling, etc., what is that reinforcing for you? If you are in the process or the habit of like waking up every morning and starting with like an hour-long workout, what is that reinforcing for you? What about like the type of food that you eat or the type of content that you consume, whether it's on television, on YouTube, on TikTok, Instagram, whatever? How is that reinforcing positive or negative things or neutral things in your life? And if you sit there and reflect on different aspects of your life, like whether it's just like on your phone or in your social circles or in your day-to-day, like with when you're driving to and from work, like what are you doing in that downtime in there? Are you listening to a podcast that helps you relax, that entertains you? Are you listening to like a podcast that informs you on something? How does that reinforce certain kind of habits for you? So hopefully that resonates for you. But let's warm up. I've been talking too much. Let's play an exercise. You got new sticks? I don't know those sticks. The abbreviation for it, at least. They explained that they got mad at you? Okay, well, hopefully, again, they don't do it again, because you don't want to, like, okay, great. Like, maybe they apologized, but if they continue to get mad and continue to take it out on you, like, it's not healthy to be in that kind of relationship. I've been in those kind of relationships before, whether it's, like, with a boss or with, like, a coworker or a significant other or a friend. Like, life is too short to waste it on people who are bringing down, and which is why I'm just like immediate ban hammer if somebody comes in the chat and is just being rude. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and waste it. Oh, the Roger Carters. Okay, yeah. I haven't used Roger sticks. I've used quite a few, but I haven't tried those out. I kind of settled on these Hardiman hammers because they're great for chops, and then for tenor sticks, I like the feel of the Hardiman tenor sticks. But, you know, to each their own. They all have different purposes. Let's warm up. Let's warm up with stick control. And let's do the advanced stick control with filler. There's many variations in here, but this one is my absolute favorite one. So not only does it do the filler, where you're playing like the same pattern. So instead of just playing, you're filling it in with that, but it also alternates between a duple feel and a triple feel. So this is my absolute favorite one, and we're going to use it to get the hands going, the blood flowing. And let me turn up the volume, jam, pump it up. That should be good. It's good. Yeah. So this is the pulse. But you play it all even. Hey Tyler, that's awesome. Congrats on being section leader. Sorry, that was really loud, so probably couldn't hear it. Tyler, that's awesome. Like, genuinely. Congrats on being section leader. And good luck with your age out and whatnot. But yeah, you're very welcome. Glad I can help in some kind of way. But let's continue to warm up. I turned the volume down because it felt like it was like screaming at me. A little more. Hey, I'm glad you like that exercise. There's a lot. We got comments in chat congratulating you as well on Instagram. Whoa. Flawless. Yeah, it's great. I actually taught this to a high school. And this was our stick control. It was great for a variety of reasons. Really helps with singles, figuring out the phrases. And to answer the question in the chat about whether to use traditional or match on drum kit, if you've like marched with traditional, it depends on what your goals are. So like if you are not going to like work on concert rep where you're playing like concert snare or like marimba with like 2 mallets or whatever, then you really don't need to know match grip unless you're going to teach. So if you're going to teach, then you need to know that because you need to be able to like demonstrate how to do whatever it is that you're going to do to at least like a good enough level. Like you don't have to be an amazing at it. Like I march snare, but I'm going to be playing tenors today. I know it well enough that I can demonstrate the basics, the fundamentals, but I never actually marched it in a performance. But for drum kit, it doesn't matter what grip you're using as long as you're just comfortable with it. So if you feel like it's going to assist with the flow of your playing while playing on drum kit, cool. For me, I personally have stuck with match grip, even though I marched with traditional grip because it's more versatile. And so I don't play traditional anymore, despite like literally years of like marching with it. So it's up to you. There's no right or wrong way on drum kit, especially because you're generally speaking the only person playing on drums. You don't need to worry about matching with somebody else like you do in the marching side of things and sometimes in the concert percussion side of things. But yeah, match grip, more versatile. Traditional grip, if you want to stick with it, stick with it. You do you. You're funny. Okay, let's stretch and massage. My hands feel warmed up-ish enough. Let's start with this one. So you take your sticks, hold them this way, and then pull in, pull in. Does marching drums translate to percussion like marimba and stuff? Yes. I mean, so like people that I know who only played marimba or only concert stuff, they generally did not have as good as technique and control over the sticks and mallets that somebody with a rudimental background did. This is speaking in generalities here. So hand speed, your technique, being able to refine your motion, all of that translates over into like better marimba playing, better concert playing, but you're using very different techniques, usually speaking. So the habits and the thoughts behind it transfer over, but not necessarily always the techniques. So like with like Steven's grip, or if you're playing like Burton grip, or you're playing with cross grip, like those don't really transfer over except for like the rotary motion with the left hand in traditional. That kind of rotation is the same thing that you're doing, the same idea that you're doing with marimba, but you're holding it differently. So it's a completely different grip than what you're doing with traditional. So it does transfer over to an extent, but it's not one-to-one. It's, well, So in the education side of things, like if you're learning a concept, there's an idea of whether or not like the concept will actually transfer over into other domains, especially if you're working in interdisciplinary context. So if like you're teaching like how to code music, how much of the music skills transfer over into coding and how much of the coding skills transfer over into music. And I'm saying those two because those are two subject areas that I've taught. But the transfer is never one-to-one. So like when you're working on something, you might learn it in a project and then you try and transfer it over into something else. It doesn't happen. Same thing with your learning a piece. So if you're like learning a marimba piece or a snare drum solo or something, you might learn some skills that will prepare you for other things, but you might only retain like 90% of like a technique and applying it to something else. I can elaborate more to kind of clarify like what that means, but I'm realizing I'm probably getting too in the weeds with it. But drumming becomes fun when you realize that matches better. I mean, to be honest, as somebody who marked snare, tenors is more fun. The reason why I liked snare though, and why it was like the instrument for me is because of like the OCD that I have, my perfectionist tendencies. I love just how precise you had to be on snare. And there's more wiggle room with dirt on tenors, which is not throwing shade at tenor lines, but you can hide things more because you're not as articulate with like a snare drum. So the Kevlar heads are much drier than like the most tenor heads. And so you can get away with more dirt on a tenor line, but like the tenor's just like moving around and whatnot. Like it's just like, that's sweet. But for snare drum, like my OCD perfectionism is like where it's at for me. But that's just me. Notice the snare player learn marimba for the fall. He had a better left-hand rotation than right. Yeah, it's because he's like refined the general motion of that, which is like, I'll be right back. I used to walk around with a doorknob, and the doorknob, it snaps back into place. And so I would actually like hold it like I was holding traditional grip or Stevens and just work on this. And so it would build up the endurance, the muscles and whatnot for stronger twitch rotation. And you can do that with right hand as well. So if they're having issues with that, with the right hand, you could have them use a doorknob. It doesn't help you win friends, but it helps you get better. Okay, so we've gone through it. We've stretched. Now let me massage. Gotta agree that tenors is more fun. Yeah, and that's coming from a snare drummer. Love playing through the drum line while on tenors. Yeah, I agree with you. I enjoy the challenge of snare. The drill for snare looks better. Interesting. Yeah, it depends on what you're doing. Like how big the line is, how things are written. Like there can be some really interesting drill parts for any instrument or any instrument grouping. It really kind of depends on how you write it. You hopped on snare when we did some battery? Yes. Yeah. There's no room for air on snare drum. Like you're like anyone's grandma can like hear it and go, that snare line sounds dirty. Which is why like when you look at some of the like the top 5 like drum lines or heck anyone in DCI, like they're throwing down some notes, especially when you compare it to 20 years ago. Some of the groups are about the same, but most of them have just significantly improved as a whole. And it's just amazing how much cleaner some drum lines are while playing way more notes. Like 3s and 4s were like unheard of, especially 4s. Like back in my day when I marched, but like now it's just like, wow. They're just playing them left and right. That snare drum sounds dirty. Grandma knows what's up. Yeah. She, anyone could tell. When you got a snare line and you're off by like just a fraction of a second, you can tell. What's weird is like when people like comment on like YouTube videos about like how dirty something is. It's like your comment like literally does nothing. Especially because, you know, the season's over. Like, this is from 5 years ago. You commenting on the dirt. Do you expect like the drumline to go back in time and be like, good point. It was dirty. Let's go fix that. Let me hop into my time machine. Thank you, random commenter. I appreciate your insights. I am a much better player as a result of it, even though I aged out a decade ago. Ooh, this finger's tight. So I'm just massaging the finger, base to tip, and then we're going to get back into some playing. Okay, so we were just playing through Advanced Stick Controlled Filler. I got some questions here. Let me actually pull this up so I can see it better. So I'm going to respond to a few things, actually, that I got some questions on YouTube for. So let me make it so I can see it. Whoa. Me watching other people, great work, so proud. Me watching myself, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Oh yeah, that Tyler, that really resonates with me. To be candid, when I started streaming these like drum practice streams, there's like now almost 300 of them up on my YouTube. I like legit was having severe anxiety when I first started because I had never practiced publicly before. I had only for decades performed like something I'd rehearsed for a very long time, showed publicly something I had spent a long time working on. And so when I started sharing, like, here's how I practice stuff, and it's like all the dirt, all the bad stuff, all the things that I need to refine, etc. Like, it legitimately was difficult for me. Like, I had like a panic attack and like just like, okay, I got to be able to work through this. I'm like live on stream. I don't want to screw up. And like even when I was just playing through the stick control while it's just warming up there, it was like I wouldn't have shared any one of those on social media, like because they weren't up to my standard, and because I'm literally just getting my hands going. But yeah, so that definitely resonates. So when people like, for somebody like me who is a legitimate diagnosed like perfectionist with OCD, like it it's like any comment you give me on like YouTube or Instagram or whatever, critiquing myself, like I guarantee you I can find 20 more things than you ever could, like that you would ever notice compared to myself. So like it's just a genuine waste of time when people do that. Anyways, actually, since we have some actual tenor players here, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this and add some insight to it. But we're going to talk about quite a few things. So first thing I'm going to say is Quad Logic. Highly recommend getting this book. This book is fantastic for just like improving your overall playing and figuring out some of the basics with tenor drumming and whatnot. One of the things that Bill Bachman talks about in this book, Quad Logic, is about playing zones. So let's give a quick overview of like what those are, since I got some questions about that. So on snare drum, you will play in the center of the head, so you get the most articulate or dead sound. There's not going to be any kind of resonance. On tenor drum is the opposite of that. So instead of playing in the center of the heads when you're going through playing on tenors, you actually want to play close to the rim. And where you play will be equidistant depending on what you're doing. So what do I mean by that? So if you are playing through tenors and you're moving over to this drum right here, if you have your right hand and your left hand staying stationary so that they're the exact same position and you just move around like this, you're going to have the right hand be closer towards the center, which makes it a deader, thuddier sound, and your left hand's going to be more resonant. That is a bad thing. The opposite happens if you go over to the other side and you play so that your left hand will now have a dead sound and your right hand will now have a more resonant sound. So what you want to do is actually use kind of like this windshield wiper approach where you are maintaining equidistance from the rim. So when you're moving around to the left side, my hands are not next to each other like this. My left hand is extended out and my right hand is a little closer. The opposite is true when you go over to the right side. Now, the reason why you want to do that specific direction as opposed to like this is because the hand that is moving the furthest is going to have to reach more if you do it like this. So my left hand is moving over across my body like this. So I don't want that. We want to put this back closer to you so you have more efficient motion. I can't speak. When you're playing through this. So your right hand will move out further, but stay equidistant from the rim. And then when you go to the left side, your left hand will move out further, and your right hand will stay over here, again, staying equidistant from here. When you're playing a multi-drum like sweep or scrape, depending on where you're at, you might call it something different, like a diddle. Instead of playing here, like if you're playing just flam accents, split between 1 and 2, when you're doing a diddle, you don't want to go for that large distance right here and maintain the same playing zones. So your playing zones actually change when you're doing it to make it more efficient, going from one drum to the next drum. Whether it's next to each other or skipping an entire drum, you want to have it be efficient as possible. So playing zones on tenors move all over the place depending on what it is you are playing. So if you're playing one here, or if you're playing on one drum, you're going to play it like this. If you're playing on one drum, you wouldn't do it like this, most likely. There might be some scenarios where you do that. But if you're playing one drum over here, now suddenly you're changing so that you're using the windshield wiper. Ooh, perfect. Like that. But if you start doing diddles, you're going to play up here as opposed to down here. Let me over-demonstrate. Press into it so you can see it. So you won't do diddles like that. Instead, you'd play diddles like this or here. And again, you're going for really efficient motions, not so efficient that you hit the rim like I was doing. If you're moving from one drum and you skip a drum to another one, again, you want to have the most efficient motion possible. So you're keeping the same vertical flow, but you're now just moving the arm over without changing the wrist, because you don't want to go like this. Why? Because that's going to give you a different sound quality if you start playing like this. Some younger tenor players, they'll see like they'll play 8 on a hand like that. Don't do that. That's going to give you a completely different sound quality. Don't believe me, try playing like that versus playing like this. But when you're playing it and you're moving across different drums, you're maintaining the same up and down motion, vertical, while you're simply moving from one to the next and trying to be as efficient as possible. So that's a very quick overview of some different types of playing zones and how you can use that when you're moving around on the drums. Now let's talk about, okay, moving around on the drums. We were just playing through stick control. Hey, thank you for the sub on YouTube. I appreciate it. Just saw that. If you're playing through stick control, like I was just doing like a moment ago, warming up. And let's say the stick control that you're playing through just has only snare part, which like the thousands of exercises on my website are basically only the snare parts. Whoa. I pressed the foot pedal. When you're doing this, you could come up with an infinite number of little variations there. So let's do the very first phrase of stick control. You're just playing right, 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 left. So, okay. So you could have one hand, dog hair. You could have one hand that is just moving in another direction. For example, move to the right. So you just loop that over and over. You could also then move to the right, going this way. So you're just moving over. Or you can move to the left. Again, maintaining an efficient motion while doing this, etc. You could also have it so that your split is more than one drum. So for example, you could move to the right and go, and you're continuing that same motion, just going over. Instead of 1, 2, 3, you're going 1, 2, 3, like that. So you could play and just repeat going to the right the entire time, or repeat going to the left the entire time. But you could also make it so you go to the right, go to the left, go to the right, go to the left. So you just kind of like ping pong back and forth like a pendulum. So you're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, while playing through the same sticking pattern. The way that I was doing it, though, was also 1, 2, 3. So I was doing 2 on the second drum. But you could also technically even go 1, 2, 3, and then the left hand. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there's many different ways that you could go about doing that. You could also, instead of just going in a direction, like to the left or to the right, is you could think of like the number of the drums and go down the number of the drums and then up the number of the drums. So it's a little weird with this 3 pattern, but you could go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or you could even go 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. So you're moving up the drums with this pattern. Or you could combine the two. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, or 1, 2, 3. I can't speak. Let me try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 3, 2. Okay? So you're just moving down or up the number of the drums. You could also go in shapes. So you could be like, you could go in like a repeated motion. So you could be like, I'm going to do a 3-drum pattern and just treat it like a triangle. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you're just going in a motion that just keeps repeating over and over. You could also do it like a Z pattern. So you could be like Zorro. Or like the Z pattern, you can move around here. You could do all sorts of like different stuff with here. You could do like a circle with 4 drums. So with like the 4 drums, you could go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That is weird because you're just constantly moving with like 3 notes, in this case, over a 4-note pattern. So 1, 2, 3. Then it starts here, 1, 2, 3. Then it continues, 1, 2, 3. And then it finishes 1, 2, 3 before it cycles over to 1. That's just, again, for the very first like measure when you're playing this. So you could cycle something, repeat something. You could do like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You can combine them. So you're going across the drum all the way over, all the way over. You could go in different motions, different shapes, different patterns. This way, go that way, etc. That's a very quick overview of like how to come up with like patterns for just that very first one. You could then do the same thing for like other ones. Like you could be doing this for the diddles. You could go up the drums or go to the inside rather. You could do crossovers. Like even the very first pattern that I was doing, you 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th note you could do here. I'm sorry, I hit the microphone. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you hit right here. 1, 2, 3, etc. So there are many ways that you can go about like, how do I want to come up with a stick control pattern for this? Now, when I'm practicing stick control, like if I'm trying to refine tenor drums, I'm just going to stick with one of those ideas and then just like sit with it until it starts to feel comfortable, as opposed to like every single rep doing something different. But when you see a drum line play through stick control, they'll play it usually, generally speaking, on one drum, just to make sure that vertical is good, because that is the most important thing to focus on with tenors. If you can't play it vertically good and you try and move it around on the drums, guess what? It's going to sound terrible. So they usually start with one drum in unison. And then they start doing a pattern where like the next rep they might do like just moving to the right or moving to the left. And then the next rep they might add in some crossovers and do some other stuff. So like if you see tenors play stick control with multiple variations, or a roll pattern with multiple variations, or like accent taps or 8 on a hand with multiple variations, they're cycling through stuff that they spent a long time working on. So it's not like they only need one rep and then it's like, cool, I suddenly have mastered like 3-drum or 4-drum scrapes or sweeps. No. What you see in the lot at like finals or whatever, at like a DCI competition, is very different than what they actually do in rehearsal. So in rehearsal, they might sit there and just like grind this out for like an hour, 5 hours, like really slow. And then when they play it in the lot, they'll be like, all right, let's play it one time. Why? It's just basically a mental check-in to make sure that they can like be focused enough to play it. And it has less to do with, honestly, the physicality, because when you look at a DCI line when they are actually in the lot, they've likely are performing in the evening, most of them are, and they've spent several hours during the day practicing either as a group or on pads on the bus, etc. So it's not like this is their very first time picking up sticks for the day, which is very different than if you're like in a high school drum line where it might literally be the first time you've played when you show up in the lot. But a lot of groups, when you show up and you've had like rehearsal in the morning. It kind of depends on your travel schedule and whatnot. I just ranted for a long bit. Let me take a look at the chat for a second. Nice explanation of zones. Oh, thank you. VDL is $10 on MuseScore. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I personally use Sibelius. So I used to use Finale, and then I use Sibelius, and that's how I make all of these play-alongs, like the stuff that's like here. There's like 1,000 of them. I wrote them all out in Sibelius. Like I just wrote 4 more yesterday that I then released, scheduled for release, actually in March. So we're that far ahead. But if you're a member, you get access to it right away. Hello, do I remember you? Yes, Matthew, welcome back. What's my opinion on the movie Whiplash? Is it accurate in terms of playing and maybe accurate in experiencing tough teachers? Really interesting question. So one, not quite my tempo. I definitely look like the lead character. I get it, the teacher that is. But genuinely terrible instruction overall. As somebody with like a doctorate in music education, I can give my stamp of a disapproval on it and say, don't ever teach like that. I have seen drumline instructors and even some music instructors teach that way, professors. And like as an example, I'll use a family-friendly version of a story that I like to give to people who haven't like studied in a school of music, what it's like when you, I knew somebody who went to a lesson and they went in and they didn't play good. And the professor said, you sound like poop. Don't come back until you don't sound like poop. And they used like a non-family friendly version of that. That basically summarizes what it's like to be in a lot of schools of music or even some drum lines or just like ensembles where the instructor doesn't know how to teach, but they know how to play. So their way of trying to get somebody to improve is to just berate them, to try and encourage them, I guess, in a really weird way to get better. But there actually has been scholarship on those kind of approaches, whether it's in an ensemble or in sports or even in work, whether you're using like a punishment model versus like a reward system or encouragement. And like hands down, the punishment model works best in very short term for outcome, but in the long run, it is the absolute worst way to go about doing things because it like completely demoralizes people. The majority of the people that I knew who went to school of music quit, like literally 3/4 of them just like end up dropping out of the school of music because it's just like that punishing and that terrible on the psyche. So you might get like a short-term result that the end product is good, but like the students might hate like making music or might hate being in the ensemble or hate the teacher. And in the long run, that is just like an absolutely terrible way to teach. So that's my slightly filtered opinion on that particular movie is, yes, I've seen instruction like that, and it is genuinely terrible instruction, and I hope nobody teaches that way. But unfortunately, I know that people do. Let me get some water real quick. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, but again, like a lot of the professors or instructors or techs or whatever that end up teaching and like think that like being mean is somehow being a good instructor, they're doing that because they don't understand pedagogy. They might not have studied how to actually teach, and they haven't thought about like how do you actually improve over time. I've been teaching since 2003, so like more than 2 decades, and like I have 3 degrees in music education. So I still feel like I'm learning about how to teach and how to communicate in a way that like can impact a variety of students. I've taught every single grade, kindergarten through doctoral student, and in not just music education context, but also in computer science context. So I've seen a wide range of students, literally thousands of students across multiple domains, and every single student is going to be different. So if I like go into like an ensemble setting where like a snare line, let's say there's like 8 people all playing the exact same way, and I go like give one comment and expect all 8 of them to get it, good luck. That's just not going to work. The people who tend to teach that way just haven't, in my experience, had enough experience working with a wide range of people in a wide range of context. And the more you get, the more you realize you have to like cater it towards the individual. If you just focus on like the average or the main group, you're going to leave some people behind, whether it's the people who are struggling and just don't understand it, or the people who are advanced and they're like, this is boring. Like, why do I want to learn this? So you really have to, like, if there's 8 people on the line, you have to work with all 8 of them as individuals. And like, maybe you'll phrase it so that like this group or this half will understand it, but then you phrase it differently for this other half, etc. Like, you have to change how you teach things. And that makes you a better performer as well, which is one of the cool things about like having taught all these different levels, like in so many subject areas, is it helps me to better understand the content that I'm teaching, because I have to rephrase it in several different ways, the exact same concept. Like we're talking about, I don't know, control of your taps after an accent. Like there are dozens of different ways that you could describe it, and they'll work differently for different people, or different exercises that you have to come up with, work with different things. So the way that I like to think about it is like approaching something from multiple different angles, multiple different attack points, to like just be oversaturate like the understanding until students can like really demonstrate it. Another way that you can actually check for understanding, instead of just like being at one directional, I teach at you, is you actually have the students teach something back to you. And that way you can like figure out like what the gaps are in their understanding. Because sometimes when students will like perform something, they might be able to demonstrate it occasionally, or maybe even consistently, but they don't necessarily understand what they're doing or how they're doing it or why they're doing it that particular way. And so if you ask them to explain it back to you as if you've never like played before, like for a snare drum, I might be like, all right, here's my grip. This is how I'm playing. Correct me. What should I do differently? And then they'll like go through and kind of like talk about like, here's how to do this. Here's how to adjust your fulcrum. Here's how you should hold your stick. Here's how you should move your hand angles, etc. Like all of those are things that you can discover to figure out like, well, how do they really understand what the motion is like for traditional grip or whatever. So there's a little pro tip for you from somebody who's been teaching forever. Let's see. So I want to make sure that I go through this. Thanks for the insight. Yes, it is pretty rough for those individuals. There's a reason why so many people end up quitting schools of music. It's unfortunate. Like again, I've gone through the entire spectrum of schooling you can get from kindergarten through doctoral, and it's amazing how bad school is until you get to like the very top. It wasn't until my master's when they're like, "What do you want to learn?" And then like for my doctorate, they're like, "What do you want to become the world expert in?" And I wish that that had been asked in like elementary school. Like, what do you want to learn? As opposed to here's all this stuff that like I don't care about, that has had zero impact on my life. Like the fact that I had, how many years was it? 11 or 12 years of like math. And in my doctorate, like I used like none of that, like ever. In my day-to-day life, I've used none of that ever. Like, if I could have specialized in things that were actually relevant to me and the interests that I had, that would have been phenomenal, which is why I like the way that I taught any of the classes that I work with or ensembles or whatever, is like I really catered it towards the students that I was working with. But that's very different than the way a lot of people do it. But I will say that educators understand the value of that. And so like if you can find like administration who also understands that, then you're in a good place. Like my superintendent will like text me and be like, hey, what can we do to make your computer science classes even better? Like, what can I give you? How can I, like, do you need money? Do you need more resources? Do you need more technology? And I was like, this is great. Like, it's very different than the previous district that I was in. Hey, Curtis, welcome back on TikTok. Appreciate you. Sorry, I'm just looking through the different chats. Trying to be a snare player in my high school line, but I don't think there's hope because all the snares are prodigies. Oh, that's a really interesting idea, but it's literally just practice. So I was genuinely terrible at drumming to the point where just like a quarter note part, it was cut from me because I couldn't play it my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I was first chair of every ensemble and section leader of the front ensemble. My junior year, I made all-state and drum corps. And then my senior year, I got a full ride in percussion performance scholarship. For my undergrad. It was just practice. Like I've had students who have called me titles and labels that I strongly disagree with and wish they didn't. Like they'd call me like the king or God or things like that at drumming. And they would often be like, oh, well, you were just like born that way, like always good. And I always had to like be like, no. What you see now is decades worth of practice. What you didn't see is when I was your age, I was genuinely terrible. So if people are way better than you at your instrument or whatever it is that you play, it genuinely just takes practice to get better at it. There are very, very, very few people who are considered to be prodigies at something. But if you look at like, I have autism, but autistic savants, savantism, they're like people who have like calendars memorized for like decades and decades and decades. That is not something that they were born with. They literally just in their head just repeat it over and over and find more like frameworks to help them through something. The same thing for myself with my own playing is I just practice all the time. Even when I didn't have like a pair of sticks with me, I was practicing in my head in classes where I was like, this is boring. I don't want to pay attention to this. I would just drum in my head and I got better that way. So the people who are ahead of you at the moment have just currently spent more time on it. And there's literally decades and decades worth of research that supports what I'm talking about. And I've read so much of it. Like I started reading research on expertise and skill acquisition and whatnot during my master's and explored it more in my doctorate. Like it is like 1-to-1. If you want to get better at something, you just have to practice it. So no matter what people say, well, Mozart. And it's like, okay, well, did you know that Mozart's dad was like literally the best violin instructor in all of Italy? And he taught his kid from a very young age and was reinforced, and Mozart practiced. And if you look at like Mozart's music from when he was like a really small child to where he was before he died, it's night and day different. It's because he just iterated on it over and over and he got reinforced like, hey, this is a good thing, and then slowly got better. Like it's not like Mozart just like woke up and was just like all of a sudden like amazing at something. He had so much training from his dad, so much time spent on like instruments, practicing and getting better, etc. Same thing applies for anybody that you see is doing amazing in any domain. It doesn't matter what it is. The only advantages that you can have like that are innate are like if you're in a sport where there's like a height advantage, like if you are tall, basketball, or things like that, like maybe hand size for certain things. But in general, you still have to practice. It's not like if I was a 7-foot tall person that all of a sudden I'm going to be in the NBA. It's like, no, I actually got to, practice free throws, etc. Like everything takes practice. So yes, the people who are currently playing on the line might be better than you, but if you invest the time, like using the resources on my website, I promise you can get better. It just takes time. Indoor, some of the people that hold the highest standards are the calmest people. Yeah, I mean, some of the people who hold the highest standards like are also the most critical, but they're figuring out how to hold back. So one of the things that I learned from Glenn Crosby, he used to work with Academy quite a bit, and then I got private lessons from him, is he would talk about how instructors have this tendency to give too much information before there's time for students to be able to process and improve something. So like if you give feedback on an exercise and then they play it one more rep and it's not better, maybe what you just needed to do instead was play 5 more reps or 10 more reps to see if it improves. So that way students have time to make little micro adjustments with their timing or their technique or their grip, etc. And then they can get better over time. As opposed to like, hey, that wasn't good enough, do it again, and like go into a long, lengthy explanation like I kind of been doing this stream, and then like play another rep. Hey, it wasn't good. You need to like really like just chill, just wait, sit back, rehearse it like you would when you're practicing. Like when in these like practice streams when I'm actually playing and not just like ranting the entire time, I spend so much time just playing through something over and over, just really refining it slow. If you treat your rehearsals the same way, where it's like a group practice session where you can improve as a group, as opposed to like this, like I tell you, you understand the knowledge and then you're instantly better. Like that's not how it works. Like you got to have that time to experiment with your technique and try and improve with it. Sorry. So what can you do if admin doesn't support you fully? Move to another location. Or there's something that John Kratos talks about, who's like a retired professor of music education. He talks about small acts of subversion. So as an example, like my admin in a district that I was in where I was like teaching elementary general music and band, the admin did not want me to teach 4th graders band because band doesn't start till 5th grade. And I was like, well, I got this student who like really wants to do it. So I taught him on my lunchtime and I just didn't tell those admin. So his dad would come up to me for like literally a decade after I stopped teaching at school, because I just transferred to a different school to teach. His dad would come up and like give me updates on his kid like playing tuba. Like he's an all-state now. Like he's like auditioning for university, etc. And it was so cool to see. Like every single time he's like, I'm so grateful that you took the time on your lunch break to teach this kid. Like if you do things like that, where it's like, what are you going to do? Fire me for teaching a child? Like what is wrong with that? So that's something that you can do. Is just a small acts of subversion. Like another example of this, when I taught band, instead of conducting like and going up with like the elementary group, I would play drum kit. And that way, like students would get just like used to like jamming out, having fun, and they're also listening to like a metronome. Basically, like there's a lot of reasons why I did it, because students, when they're like figuring out like, well, what is B on a clarinet? Like they're not going to be looking up at like whether or not your like nuances with your ictus when you were conducting. Like none of that matters, genuinely. So I just like omitted it from it and didn't teach the way that my admin wanted me to teach, because I had 3 music education specific admin, not just like teachers or principals. So yeah, you can just like do those small acts of subversion and then just go with the idea of like, again, what what are you going to do? Fire me for like doing what's best for the students that I work with? Like, fine. There's a teacher shortage all around the country. Like, all right, you want to get rid of me because I'm trying to like really help the students that I'm working with? Fine, I'll just go teach somewhere else. Like, and you might even get more pay, etc. When am I doing another gaming stream? In like 30 minutes. We'll be playing Hogwarts Legacy. But yeah, I appreciate it. All the highlights are on the YouTube channel. Sorry, lots of comments. Aaron, hello. Sorry, I just saw your comment on Instagram. Let's see. One rehearsal, I had the front ensemble play a simple 8th note run for like 30 minutes straight because I knew... Yes, because you knew that a million bits of information would not help. Yeah, I mean, sometimes students just don't practice. So, like, the level of preparation that you might come to a rehearsal might be very different than some of the students that you work with. So, while you might be prepared, they might have had, like, a family member die in the last week, and then, like, guess what? They didn't rehearse. So, you got to take that into account. You can't just be like, how dare you not think this is the most important thing in the world? Like, you got to monitor and adjust and whatnot and, like, you know, improve as a group. You do what you can with like what you're given with the students that you work with. Sometimes you need to be like, hey, you were literally just like playing video games all day. You did absolutely nothing to prepare. Like, you're wasting my time. It would just be repeating the same thing. So I'll see you next week. Like, go practice. Sometimes you gotta like put your foot down and do that. But most of the time, like, life happens and get in the way. Do I teach privately in the school system? In Texas? No. I've never actually taught in Texas. But I used to teach privately, and then when I was working on my doctorate, I stopped teaching privately because I just didn't have time for it, even though it was like really good money. And then I used to teach publicly in person, like to group settings, but then I switched over to making online content for people. For computer science educators and students. And then like in that job, I was like the director of education and research. And so I made content that was used by millions of teachers and students around the world. And while I was doing that for several years, I was like, why don't I do this for drumming? Like, I could very easily do it. My doctorate's in music education. Like, I have the experience, I have the knowledge. Let me just shift my focus. So I've switched over to doing this. What are the pros and cons compared to teaching privately? Okay, so hey, doggo. Private teaching is generally, it can be better pay if you have the experience and the abilities as an educator to be able to like help people one-on-one, but the income is very inconsistent. Also, you have to worry about not only just like paying your taxes, but you also have to pay like Medicare and insurance and whatnot. And that is something that a lot of people don't take into account. Is like when I was a full-time teacher, the state provided insurance for me that would have cost like hundreds or thousands of dollars a month in addition to like the taxes being taken out. So that's a kind of payment that a lot of private instructors don't necessarily think about. But the payment is also super inconsistent. So like when I was teaching privately and doing drum corps, I would go away from the summer and like my entire income would go away for a couple of months. And then I'd come back and like some students would just like move on and find another instructor because they didn't want to wait a couple of months for me to come back. But also like in the holiday times, like students would go away and like travel for family. So like even though the hourly rate was higher, it's like 1 week I might make like $1,000 and the next week I might make like $50. Like it was super inconsistent with that. So that's something you have to consider, the private versus public. With public, there's also a lot of stuff outside of teaching that you have to account for. So like when I was teaching, I had to do like lunch duty and like go to meetings and stuff. Like lunch duty where you just stand around and make sure children don't light things on fire during their lunchtime. Like that was a complete waste of my time. You could have paid a paraprofessional like a minimum wage as opposed to me, like a teacher with a doctorate. Like my pay scale is going to be much higher. So you end up spending your time like wasting it not teaching quite a bit. Or if you have homework that you have to grade, things like that. Like that's stuff that you don't really have to do for private lessons. For private lessons, you also have like one-on-one, you're able to help students and get much deeper than you can with like a class of 30 kids. Like as much as I was just talking about, like you have to be able to work with every single student individually when you're teaching. The same thing applies, well, let me rephrase it. So that's not an issue with one-on-one instruction. You could do like small group, like private lessons where like, hey, I've got opening for 4 people that I can teach in a small group setting who are like similar ability levels, but you're still trying to treat them one-on-one. That is so hard to do with like a class of like 30 or 35 students like I've had with like kindergarten classes. Like working with them individually, like you're just constantly walking around the room, answering questions, asking questions, trying to like point them towards resources, etc. So like it's hard compared to like teaching privately. Teaching privately is super easy. It's just like you also have to be able to promote yourself, and that you technically have to do for some classes where it's not mandatory. Like you have to like go to the middle school to like promote it for the high school, or like run an after school like free drumline experience that helps people who have never drummed before learn how to do drumline, etc. With private instruction, you could do social media to try and like find some things for like, or rather find some clients, find some students, etc. But if you have like a mandatory class, like the computer science classes that I taught or the general music classes that I taught, everybody had to be there whether they wanted to or not. That was like, I didn't have to worry about marketing or advertising it, but that also creates some issues. So like having taught classes where people are paying to be there, like thousands of dollars sometimes, versus people who are required to be there, it's night and day. Like the people who are paying for their college education or even for like drum corps or drumline or whatever, they're automatically bought into the subject area, which is very different than if you're teaching like a gen ed class where like everybody's required to be there. When I taught those kinds of classes, I had to really focus on like meeting the student where they're at, and like I can't assume that you actually like the thing we're talking about or exploring, etc. Instead, like I already knew that people in private lessons like wanted to be there because they're literally paying me to be there, etc. Exact same Colin's experiencing right now. Used to be a band director and switched for mental health. Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to hear that you're focusing on your mental health. As somebody who was suicidal for like a decade and then like just like chronic depression, etc. Like focusing on the mental health side of things is super important. I've had, thankfully, a very good therapist for a few years now. And when I was like suicidal, I had a very good therapist who helped me through that. My wife is a therapist. Like therapy is super important. But I'm glad to hear that you're focusing on your mental health. Like it's important to just shift if you need to. It's okay to step away from something and come back to it. I stepped away from drumming for a while when I was working on my doctorate because I just didn't have the time to do it. And that's okay. But if you have like questions about like private instruction, like how to promote it or things like that, feel free to stop by in future streams and whatnot. But actually, let me answer a couple of questions that I got real quick on here for tenors. So this was also a question that I got. So if you're playing something like the rudiment builder exercise, actually, let me do it this way. So if you're playing like rudiment builder and the rudiment builder is like, let's say flam accents, go with the hand, combined hands together as opposed to, and figure out some different split patterns where you're like, okay, I'm going to play it so that the right hand moves to the right side, the left hand moves to the left side. So if this is what my pattern is going to be with the flam accents on here, what does that translate to when you're playing just one hand? And then you add in, etc. But you could also be like, all right, all accents are going to be on this drum. All taps are going to be on this drum. So when you're working on flam accents or something and you're doing this, you're going to have to take into account like your playing zones when doing these crossovers, also where it's going to cross over with your sticks. So are you doing a stick over stick crossover like this, or are you doing a wrist over wrist crossover like this? Wrist over wrist is generally speaking going to be done with like one or more drums crossing over. So there's like a gap of one or more drums, as opposed to if you're playing on the next drum over, it's going to be stick over stick. Now, another thing that tenor players need to focus on is what kind of grip you're using. So snare drummers can get away with playing on their right hand a German grip where it's flat, an American grip where it's at an angle, or even a French grip where your thumb is up. You can do any of those. But with tenors, it is much harder to play with a German grip. If we take a look at this and we're doing like a crossover here, a wrist over wrist crossover, there's more surface area for the back end of my stick to hit here, which can create some issues, which is why you can see, generally speaking, more tenor lines will play with a French grip. So look at the change in the surface area here for how much potential impact I can have with the back end of the stick onto the wrist when you're playing this. So if you're playing with a German grip, there's a way more surface area, a little bit less with American grip, but significantly less if you're playing with a French grip on here. So when you see tenor players play, they might have a completely different technique with the right hand compared to the snare line, which might be flat at a tilt, or it could be as a French grip. Let's see, there's another thing. Okay. I think I'll talk about this other one in 2 days. So there's another thing that like somebody was asking about with like how to practice something. I'll demonstrate that in 2 days, which will help with that. So let me delete that. But anyways, really cool questions in the chats this morning. I appreciate everybody on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. Like, I like talking about things that are not just like the same thing over and over, and you all delivered today. So like genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I appreciate it. The conversation was cool, in my opinion. And my thing is frozen. Cool. Did it break? Maybe. Let's try closing that. Let's see, Tyler. They got a question. The beginner school. Yeah. Hey, you're very welcome. Love the content. Wish you can meet. So I used to do like when I play Fortnite, I'd sometimes like squat up with like viewers and whatnot, but there was things that the viewers would sometimes say that were not very family friendly. And because like I used to teach like elementary school, like kindergartners, like those kids would be like, I want to watch streams, but like I can't because the streamer is always swearing or talking about inappropriate things. So like I don't do that. So I like stopped like doing the invite for like people who were watching, because like I don't need you to say like racial slurs or swear words or things like that, because it's just not cool and inappropriate. But I appreciate you. But anyways, okay, so the exercises that I like warmed up with before I went on a long old rant talking about many different things, you can find it on my YouTube channel. And I added in at the top of each one of the playlists like a short video, like a minute or two, that talks about like how to use the different play-alongs. But if you go to my home tab on YouTube, this is where you can find literally over 1,000 free drumming videos. And I keep adding more daily. A new one releases publicly daily, but I just scheduled like 4 more for March. We're that far ahead. So if you're a member, you get early access to all these videos. But again, every one of these will come out for free, and you can find them there. If you don't want to go through this like mess of playlists on YouTube, the best way to actually sort through everything that I give away for free is the very first link at the top of the description of every video. Like use these to jump to a BPM, but use the very first link to go to this page, which has literally 1,000 free exercises and several hours of drumming tips in here. So like today's stream, because I ranted about a bunch of different things, I'm going to snip those out into like shorter videos that I will put into this drumming tips playlist here. So check that out if you're interested in it. If you enjoy this content, just share it with somebody else. That's it. That's all I ask. Or use it. You know. Happy 9th anniversary. Thank you. Almost there. In a couple of weeks. We'll get there. But anyways, I appreciate all the questions again. I think you're all wonderful. And I'm going to tear this down, and I'm going to get ready for Hogwarts Legacy. So we're going to game here in a little bit. But I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thank you, and goodbye.